Hey, Husker fans, welcome back to the Husker Big Red YouTube channel. I'm Chris Peterson, and joining me as always is Danny Gillette. And we are back for one of our live streams here. And I know we missed last weekend. I was had some work stuff going on, so we're back here. I had a little bit of a cold I had to get over this week, but still fighting my way through it. And it's a big weekend for the Huskers. Danny, how you doing this morning, man?
It's a long broadcast season, and sometimes you have work things and fighting through colds, but you're off the injury report this morning, so it's good to be back. Good to be back on this Saturday. Second Saturday of February. Time is flying, and I'm sure Matt Rule and company hopefully are at least resting after a successful kind of culmination to the 2024 class on Wednesday.
Yeah, it actually turned out to be a pretty big week for Nebraska football, the old signing day. They got, some new additions to the 2024 class, which we're going to talk about here. Thought we would talk about some Nebraska basketball. We got some big games on tap today and tomorrow for the Huskers, the men and women. So any other thoughts that you guys have on the Huskers? Hopefully you can come in and join us here. Feel free to put your comments in chat. I mean, anything that you guys want to talk about, is fair game. But, we love when you guys kind of drive the conversation. But I guess to start, I would like to talk about this recruiting class and kind of, put a bow on it. National Signing Day isn't what it used to be. Obviously, that's the early signing day. But for the second year in a row, Nebraska's done work on the National Signing Day in February, and they get Keanu Wilhite. They ended up signing him, and then also Kamir Prescott. And these are both guys, I mean, whether they're, on the NIL preferred walk-on thing or scholarship or whatever, they're both ranked in the top 723 overall of the 24/7 composite rankings. They're both guys that Nebraska really wanted. Prescott was a guy they really, were high on before he committed to Wisconsin. So I feel like getting these guys late, the way they did is just, a boon for this coaching staff. And I think it's a really smart way for Matt Rule to use NIL, maybe in a way that some other schools aren't. And so I feel like Nebraska's kind of ahead of the curve in this way of getting more, scholarship, high school, or not scholarship, but getting more high school players, into their class, where it seems like other programs are focusing their NIL solely on the transfer portal.
Which is interesting because, you can do a little bit of both. And, Nebraska's 2024 recruiting class is kind of an anomaly in the sense that it's a mostly high school kids. You see the transfer portal, being used as a way for instant, not gratification, but instant impact players. And, Nebraska kind of used the transfer portal this cycle as, a way to fill holes and not necessarily the bulk of the class. And, Prescott is really interesting because I think both Prescott and Wilhite, they're not just some guys that they wanted to get because of, their, potential and star ranking. They actually fit this defense really well. I was looking at some of Prescott's, highlights and huddle film on Wednesday, and his athleticism really stands out. And, Prescott has the ability to come down and make plays, as well as make plays in coverage. And when you look at the structure of this Nebraska defense, kind of playing positionless is what fits this defense most. So his ability to, be a hard hitter and have quick instincts and close on a play, I think is going to really serve him well in this defense. And, in that respect, I think Prescott is the perfect mold for a safety. And so I think, Prescott, for example, was, kind of one of the last members to be signed of the 2024 class, he should definitely not be overlooked.
No, not at all. And you look at just some of his 24/7 sports profile. He ran in May of 2023. So, as a junior, he ran the 100-meter dash in sub 11 seconds, like in 10:9. So he definitely has the type of speed that you're looking for. Ran a 22.26 in the 200. So, I mean, that's also, if he can run that, in the 20-second range, I mean, that's basically what Nebraska's looking for out of their athletes. And who knows exactly what happened with Wisconsin, but 6'1", 190. I remember, when he was during his recruitment, I remember he visited, and I thought that there would be a good chance of Nebraska getting him because of the Philadelphia connection. And I was disappointed because he committed like the next weekend, it felt like, to Wisconsin. And
yeah, I remember that as well.
So the fact that they were able to turn around and land him, as a preferred walk-on, I think is huge. And Keanu Wilhite, man, he reminds me a lot of, Cameron Leonard, Princewell Umamalian, just another explosive athlete, on the edge, 6'5", 240 pounds. I think he had 8 or 9 sacks last year in high school. So, I mean, that shows he can get to the quarterback. And I definitely think Mitch is right, talking about Prescott being the second best defensive back of the class, at least to come in and play early. I mean, you get, Buford, and I like Gradney, and I like Benning. I think this is a really, really strong defensive back class. Braylon Prude, Evan Taylor, Rex Guthrie, some of those guys I think will end up eventually being linebackers. But man, when you talk about that back, I guess you can't even say the back 7 with Nebraska, almost the back 8, but that back 7, 8 guys, there's a lot of talented, versatile athletes that Matt Rule and Tony White, are going to be able to utilize on this defense.
And then if you look at, what they did last year a little bit by moving a guy like Bryce Turner to defensive back due to the wide receiver depth, I mean, now you have yet another guy in your defensive back room that you can kind of, add there. And some may say, well, it's a lot of defensive backs and how they all play. Tony White, I thought, did a fantastic job of substituting at different points in the game to allow his unit to stay fresh. And so I do think there's a chance that you could see them all on the field, at some point over the course of games. And I kind of just wanted to touch on Keanu Wilhite real quickly on the defensive line. I wrote about him a little bit on Wednesday on HuskerBigRed.com, and I was just really impressed with the way he collapsed offensive lines and he collapsed pockets. He has a lot of, pure strength that allows him to win battles against offensive linemen, and he's disruptive at the point of attack. And one of the things that was really kind of noticeable to me was, his long, rangy arms and how he used those to disrupt plays as well. His reach allows him to get leverage on his matchup, and it kind of really goes hand in hand with his game and being a disruptive pass rusher. So when you look at the defensive line for this year, let's just say we have Ty Robinson and we have Nash, and now we have Keanu Wilhite. I think the defensive line group will be strong beyond Robinson and Nash once they leave the program, and it's quite frankly, it's become one of the strongest positions on this roster.
Yeah, really quick. I mean, overnight, it seems like with Terrence Knighton, he really has done, a spectacular job, not just on the recruiting trail, but and Matt Rule gave him a shout out, but he's done a spectacular job with some of these guys. And just last year, even getting Lenhart, Umamalian ready to play. I mean, he really was spectacular. James Williams is another name that comes to mind. I mean, it seems like
Riley Van Poppel.
Yeah, Riley Van Poppel. And there's a lot of reasons to be excited about, that defensive front. And I guess it does bear mentioning, the Tony White, the UCLA thing, in Keanu Wilhite too. I mean, he was very. We should thank Chip Kelly for this one, because if it wasn't for Chip Kelly, which I really don't understand, taking an offensive, going to another team within the same conference and becoming the offensive coordinator, that just strikes me as very weird. And I don't know. I'm not sure what Chip Kelly's thinking, and I don't know. I mean, it could be a really good marriage, but I don't know, man. I'm not sure that I would. Because Chip is a weird dude. He is a weird dude. He cares about his offensive system, I think, more than he cares about winning. So I'm not sure. I'm just not sure about
that's interesting that you say that, because I always agreed. I even remember dating back to his days with the Philadelphia Eagles, and he tried to run a college offense there with the Dream Team, and that didn't work. That didn't work out too well. So, and then you have Bill O'Brien at BC, which I think is honestly the perfect match. And Massachusetts native, a lot of local ties around here, obviously with the Patriots and stuff like that. So Bill O'Brien at BC, I know some people may look at that as a downgrade, but I do think he'll have a chance to have success here because, quite honestly, upper management or, the heads of BC are very stringy with their athletic pocketbook, so to speak. So I think he'll do really well at trying to make the best out of what is a struggling program, and the mess that Hafley left, thank goodness he'll now transfer to Green Bay.
Yeah, it's well,
Sorry,
it's just
Chris, but I gotta say, I was just happy that Hafley's gone. See ya.
well, I think Hafley's, I think he's a good defensive coach. I think, the roster management is, where basically said he was sick of being a general manager. I think that's where Chip Kelly was at too, but Chip just doesn't. I think he's just lazy. I mean, if you look at
Yeah.
recruiting, I mean, these guys, he wants to sit there and say, "Oh, I don't have the same recruiting budget." Well, Chip, I mean, they made the fewest offers basically of any Power Five program. They don't recruit. Chip Kelly does not recruit people. I mean, that's just he doesn't want to, and that's why he wants to go to Ohio State, because he wants to call plays and not have to recruit. And I mean, I understand that, but it's like, man, that for a guy whose star was, I mean, 10 years ago when he had Oregon in the national championship game, did you ever think he would walk away from a Power 5 Big Ten head coaching job to be somebody else's assistant? That's baffling to me.
And it's kind of interesting because maybe if he actually showed that he was at least trying in recruiting, his recruiting budget would increase. So, funny how things work. Have you spoken? Oh, this is 100% purely hypothetical. 100% purely hypothetical. But
I mean, you can see it by what he does, though.
Yeah,
I
by
mean,
what the results speak for themselves. I mean, Chris just said 10 years ago, and I think it's even longer than that now a little bit. So, I mean, Chip has never wanted to put in the work, and that was pretty evident when he was the coach of the Philadelphia Eagles, when he had an all-star roster, and he still managed to flounder. So, I mean,
yeah, just look at how many kids that, I mean, this year I think they signed 10 recruits and like 6. I don't think he's ever signed more than 15 recruits at UCLA. I mean, it's always he'll get transfer guys, but the thing is he just like doesn't want to recruit them. I mean, like if you ask, a 24/7 sports guy brought this up, who does, California recruiting is basically his focal point. And one thing he said is, when you ask the question, who's recruiting you hardest, UCLA was never the answer. So, I mean, Chip can complain about, his recruiting budget or whatever, but I mean, it's not, he didn't put in the work. So, I mean, there's also that aspect of it too.
Which is weird when you think about it, because in order to run his offense, you need playmakers. And if you have no playmakers, you can't run your offense too well. So you would think the light bulb would go off in his head and say, hey, maybe I need to recruit some high-level guys in order to run my offense. But the effort and the effort was just never there.
I do think that, he'll have he'll run the football well. I think that he will run the ball more than Ohio State did in the past.
Well, they never ran the ball, so that's not really setting the bar high either. But it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, but he's definitely. I mean, he's shifted more to a lot to run. I mean, he run the football a lot with UCLA, like in Zach Charbonnet, and so I think that he's going to try to do that a lot. But I'm just interested to see how that relationship works out with Day and Brian or Chip Kelly. But anyways, I did want to go back to this point from Mitch. We're going to have to do something to keep Terrence Knighton, co-DC title or something. The NFL will come calling in 2 years from. I would not be surprised if an NFL team came calling for Terrence Knighton like this offseason.
Yep.
So, I mean, we're not out of the woods on that front by any means. Once the Super Bowl gets over, there's going to be even more, coaching turnover and, guys, filling out their staffs. I don't think it's going to happen this year, but yeah, it's definitely on the radar. I mean, and Tony White, he's mentioned as a candidate for UCLA. I think PJ Fleck maybe is, being talked about for that job. So I don't see Tony White leaving for that, but I mean, I do think he's going to leave in the next couple of years. So Tony White's not going to be here forever. And Terrence Knighton, to me, it seems like Dvorak's going to be the next defensive coordinator if he's on the staff, but that's just that's my read on it. But yeah, Terrence Knighton, definitely, I think you need to give him a pay raise and, make him one of the highest paid assistants on the staff for sure, because he has proven he's very, very worthy to this, a worthwhile addition, I guess I should say. Sorry, I got caught up in my words there.
I would always rather have coaches move on to higher and better paying jobs than to have to pay their buyouts. And yes, I know I'm not paying their buyouts, but we saw a lot of buyouts in the previous regime and got kind of old after a while. Let's see.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Mitch is saying the way the conferences are realigning, the Big Ten is more popular as a coaching destination, other than the SEC, the Big 12, ACC. Well, yeah, and the Pac-12 doesn't exist anymore. So yeah, I mean I agree with
And
you.
the ACC is very close to not existing either.
Yeah, I mean if the ACC loses Florida State, they're done. I mean, in terms of a power football conference, because if Florida State leaves, Miami's leaving. Like that's happening, and then Clemson will probably try to leave. I don't know if anybody wants Clemson anymore, which is interesting because it seems like Clemson could have went to the SEC a few years ago, but yeah, I don't. And that's the thing is like, who does want Florida State and Miami though? Does the Big Ten? Does the SEC? Because I
The Big Ten would
guarantee.
make the most sense for Miami because if you look at and sorry I keep interrupting you. I'm
No,
actually
you're
very
good.
wide awake and sharp today. So we have Rutgers and Maryland, which is kind of on the East Coast, and then we have Penn State, and then obviously now we have UCLA, Oregon, Washington, USC, West Coast. Obviously the Midwest, we have Nebraska, Northwestern, Iowa. And so adding Miami or Florida State, I think probably likely more Miami, would just give the Big Ten another base in another part of the country.
See, I feel like
Miami would be cool to add, honestly, too.
Well, Miami, one thing people don't realize about Miami, but it's a very prestigious academic institution, so it would fit into the Big Ten, it's in terms of that, which Nebraska actually doesn't. And that's something that Nebraska's president recently brought up. The new president was talking about how, GPA is an important thing for the Big Ten, in the future of the Big Ten. And they do very much care about that AA. There's something, I can't remember what it is, there's a academic conference. I can't remember what it's called, the AAC or something. But anyways, Nebraska's not in it. They're like the only Big Ten team that is not in it. And so that's something to watch over the next few years. Although I really don't think that I'm not that worried about Nebraska not being in the Big Ten just because they are such a big brand. They're such a big money. They're one of the Nebraska's still a place that in terms of like TV eyeballs, like I feel like it's very attractive in that way. I mean, I think Nebraska very much so is more attractive than like say Washington, because I know that 10 years ago people cared about the markets. That was the thing, was getting the TV markets for the TV stuff, for your cable, like your Big Ten network, and giving as much. But now it's more about TV draws and who's gonna give you the best leverage for TV money. And Nebraska, frankly, I think definitely over Washington, definitely over Oregon. And I think maybe even, USC probably is a bigger name than Nebraska, but not by
UCLA,
much.
Not UCLA.
Definitely not UCLA. Yeah. UCLA's basketball. I mean, they're a good basketball brand.
They are.
And that's what would be interesting is like, say if you did like the ACC, say you did, here's what I think would be really interesting. Duke, North Carolina, Miami, Florida State. And then maybe, I guess, might as well throw in two more to get to 24 teams. But I mean, if you brought Duke and North Carolina to the Big Ten, I mean, basketball wise, like that'd be an unbelievable conference. I mean, you would be loaded, kind of in both regards. Like you'd have the number one, I think, TV deal for basketball.
Yeah.
And then you would have the number one TV deal probably for football, or at least right there with the SEC. So, and that's the other thing too, is like, I don't know if, like, we've already kind of talked about this on previous shows, but Florida will do everything possible it can to avoid Florida State joining the SEC, and Clemson, South Carolina will do the same thing with Clemson, because the way they see it, like Florida, they do not want Florida State to be able to recruit with that SEC title. You know what I mean? So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, but I definitely think things are consolidating towards that, like a big 2-team division.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned the academic part of things, because the ACC just added Cal, Stanford, and SMU. Mm-hmm. So those are academic. Well, I'm not sure about SMU, but I know Cal and Stanford are. So, I mean, granted, they're not sports powerhouses, but from an academic perspective, it definitely makes sense.
Yeah, it's that whole thing is college sports. Just, man, they've got so.
Can you imagine being from Boston College and then having to fly out on a weekend like Cal or Stanford for an away game?
Yeah, that's insane. Yeah. SMU. I mean, it's just, yeah, it's very strange how
definitely
it's
not with the kids in mind. I'll say that they don't care about the kids; they care about money. And
yeah,
people complain about the transfer portal and this, that, and the other thing, but I mean, the schools and the coaches don't care about the kids either. So, I mean, I think it's just there's no loyalty everywhere, and I see it blamed a lot on the players, but it's not just the players. It's clearly the coaches in the schools as well. It's all about the money.
Yeah, it's just this system that the NCAA has set up where it's just, like you said, everybody's trying to get the most money they can for themselves. The coaches, the players, the conferences, everybody, and the TV people. And I feel like that, ultimately the blame can be laid at the NCAA because they just do not know how to manage this. They need to give up football at the Power 5 level, and it's not going to be. This sport is not going to be fixed until the NCAA gets the hell out of the way. Honestly, that's what
The
needs to
NCAA
happen.
has never been good at managing anything, and
No.
when they have an idea and they open Pandora's box, and then they act surprised, and then they say, "Oh, it's about academics first." No, it's not. And you at the NCAA know it. It's not about academics anymore. And you bring an idea, you fail to execute an idea properly, you open Pandora's box, and now you act surprised. Don't act surprised. This was going to happen. You never manage anything well, and in an age where things need to be managed well, I mean, it's either get with it or get left behind. So I'd love for college sports to not have the burden of the NCAA itself anymore.
Yeah, at least,
Yeah,
Mitch,
exactly, Mitch.
football's gotten too big for the NCAA, and I think you could probably make the case for NCAA, Division I basketball too. I mean, yeah, the NCAA can probably run a lot of the sports that they run, the track and field and stuff like that, but the way that it's gone with football, there's no.
Yeah.
I mean, like what they're trying to hit Tennessee with all these rules violations. It's like everybody is literally doing that. So how are you saying? Like, I understand why Tennessee is like kind of pissed about it because it's like,
Yeah.
I mean, I get it, but so is it. I mean, how can you penalize Tennessee but not Ohio State? I mean, literally, the Ohio State kid before they signed the Jeremiah Smith. I mean, he even said that he checked to make sure the NIL deal hit before he signed. Like, that's literally enticement. That's literally, he said it. I don't know
And
what
also, what did
else.
you think was going to happen
I
when you
mean,
offered this NIL? Like, it's literally such a gray area. Like,
yeah,
how can you? I don't know. The sooner
but
these sports separate from the NCAA, the better.
to take it back to a point I made originally, though, to Nebraska,
Yeah.
is that I was thinking about this the other day, though, and I do think it's smart in how how Matt Rule is building this, because you look at like Evan Taylor, Alexander Rugaroli, I'm pretty sure Keanu Wilhite, Jordan Ochoa, Kamir Prescott, all these guys, they used NIL in lieu of a scholarship to get him into this program, and so it's like I said, other teams are utilizing that to add transfers, and Nebraska still is too. But it's the thing is Matt Rule has built such a strong culture in 1 year. He didn't need a whole lot of money for the transfer portal because they had very few needs, because they convinced guys like Ty Robinson and Nash Hutchmaker and Gifford. I mean, they convinced all those guys to come back for another year, and I think that is huge. And partially, I think that is also because they do have a strong NIL based salary thing at Nebraska. But I just find it's very interesting that they're investing in high school recruiting so much at a time when a lot of programs frankly aren't. And I think that it's going to pay off for them long term, because these guys are going to stay, they're going to get on scholarship, and it's adding, with the transfer portal too, there's fewer scholarships available for high school players, right? Because more teams are hitting the transfer portal, and Nebraska is also seeing that and utilizing it and
Yep.
finding those players that are good enough to have scholarship, but just got, squeezed out for one reason or another. And so they're finding that kind of that thing on the margins that they can get. And I think that's very, very smart. That's what you got to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also too, the emergence of the transfer portal as a major figure in college football, a major entity, allows for some of the really, really good high school kids to go under the radar. And I think that works to Nebraska's advantage as well. Because we were talking about it, last year, how Nebraska needed to be built from, like a house. You build the base and then you build the program. These last couple of high school classes are the base for this Matt Rule program, and now they can really start to build the foundation. And I think, Matt Rule's strategy of going into the high school ranks for a lot of recruits, will help build the base for the program and, kind of build that house.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just the way that, and Mitch's point here, imagine having a team with 100 scholarship quality players on the roster, that's where we're headed. I would make the case we're there right now. I would make the case that we are there right now with the way that Nebraska's built this thing. I know some of those guys are, still freshmen, and that's why it was so funny when Rule, he said, I got people on the streets, stopping me and asking me how we're gonna solve this scholarship situation. He's like, I got under control, and I trust him, man. He knows what he's.
It's so funny that
doing.
people ask that. Sorry.
Yeah, and it's like,
out of all the things.
Yeah, it is funny. It's like, man, he's finding the little edges, and I love that. Anything that you can do to give yourself an advantage, a program like Nebraska, and I just love the energy at his press conference, man. Like he just had a different vibe to me. Like, just I could sense, he talked about urgency, and I could see it. Like it was like he wanted to get away from the press conference to like get back to work on this team, and I just feel like that these guys are going to be on a mission. And I know I'm a hardcore Kool-Aid drinker, but I just really feel like this is the year that we're finally like not going to be tortured souls for Nebraska football. But I don't know.
And then after the Iowa game, he'll be Scott Frost 2.0 all over again, and we'll restart the same cycle. Just kidding. But I mean, I think at the end of the day, I mean, you talked about the energy in his press conference. I always go back to the one where he conveniently mentioned the dollar figures for a high profile quarterback, and then the 1890 initiative really started to ramp things up. So it was interesting how that worked, but he seems very calculated in everything he does.
He is very calculated, and he's very, and now honestly, I think with Harbaugh gone, and I do think Sharon Moore is going to be a good head coach, but he's not Jim Harbaugh. I think that Nebraska has one of the best head coaches in the Big Ten. I mean, I really believe that. Outside of I know he hasn't won as much as some of these other guys, but I really feel like in 2 or 3 years, people are going to be like, yeah, Matt Rule's a damn good coach. And so, regardless of the things I've said about him in the past, when I get upset, like I said, I can't be held accountable for what I say on game. But no, I think it was, I think even if you talk to him, it was extremely frustrating how, I remember him kind of like shaking his head, like, how the hell is this happening with all these turnovers? So I don't know, man. We got to get rid of the turnover curse, and I hope that Dylan Raiola is like the curse breaker, because that's the key.
I wish we played Michigan this year. Honestly, we got Michigan at the wrong time last year.
Yeah, we'll see what happens over the next, through the spring.
Jesse Minter is probably, I think, a bigger loss than Harbaugh.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think I do like Wink Martindale though, because I think good. Then the best, it's not even that he's good. They don't have to change the system. And if they keep their same, I'm telling you, if Michigan doesn't lose any of their main players to the transfer portal, their defense is going to be as good as any in college football. I guarantee it. It'll be the best in the Big Ten. No question in my mind.
Harbaugh has built a nice staff out in L.A. Greg Roman and Jesse Minter. That's pretty solid.
I'm interested. I don't know about Greg Roman and Justin Herbert, but we'll see. We'll see how it all works out. But I do think that it has created a power vacuum in the Big Ten. I do think that that's the case. So what's interesting is how Matt Rule has evolved so fast about NIL. His first year, he didn't really seem to want to talk about it, wouldn't even talk about it with recruits. Now he's much more aggressive and intelligent with how he's using it, and I love that. And I love, too, that Nebraska is one of the few, and I don't know exactly how much they make, but I have talked to players, and I know they get a base salary. Even like the punter, Brian Buschini, gets a base salary NIL. So they don't have to worry. So that's why I don't think you're seeing as many guys leave via the transfer portal, because they're already getting taken care of, with a monthly type of salary. And so, that's why I feel like with guys like, Hutchmaker and Gifford, and even that's why I feel like you're seeing guys, 30 grand. That makes sense. That's a good, now I do think that there are probably players that probably get more, you know what I'm saying? And then that's the way that it should be. But
that's the way life works. Yeah.
If you have everybody that's getting some type of, what I think is important there is then like your backup players, who maybe you're like, now I'm trying to think of somebody who could be, maybe like an up and coming sophomore that, could be tampered with from another program. That's less likely to, that's less likely to happen because he knows he's at least getting his money here. right? And it's not always, when you go to other places, it's not always the same. I don't know if you saw, there was a did you see the Tulsa coach this week, what he said?
I didn't.
So he had a kid that was trying to transfer. He said, and texted him and was like, I was getting like 6,000 or 7,000 a month or something. And he's like, I got 2 dogs and a girlfriend, and I got to make sure I can, take care of this stuff. And the guy texts him back, and the coach texts him back. He goes, "Get rid of the dogs, and I'm not sure about the girlfriend." It's like, man, I don't think the way of getting players is telling them to get rid of their dog, man. That's like ditch the dogs. You can't ditch the dogs, man. Come on. I'm just saying, but it's just interesting how it all works out, and I think every program has a different take on it. But I think the way Nebraska is doing it is really, really well. I mean, they obviously are able to get 5-star talent, but they're getting the preferred walk-ons too. So they're finding ways to do it on both ends of the spectrum, and I think that is important. I think that's where they're doing it better than other teams.
And I think this is a fair question. How do we get kids to move on who are contributing if they won't get $30,000 anywhere else? I mean, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Because I feel like there's probably some sort of agreement with this money where, if they transfer out, then, or I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I can see what you're saying. I feel like that's, you're going to have that happen sometimes. I mean, it's kind of like with, I just feel like that's part of the operating, just kind of doing business type of thing. Like, if you're an NFL team, there's a certain portion of your salary cap, right, that's going to be wasted. And you just probably have to understand that going into it. I'm sure you're going to try to do whatever you can with those players to say, hey, like, you're not going to play here. And, I know Matt Rule has talked about he's not trying to push kids off the roster. I think he's just very upfront with them, like, hey, you're not going to. And then if the kid wants to stay and play, like, I don't know what really else what you can do. So, I mean, I think it could be a good and a bad thing, but I think overall, I think it's a more of a net positive in terms of, keeping the players you want on the roster, which to me is more important than, you're probably going to have some, there's probably some on the team last year that they're like, yeah, this, maybe didn't deserve that amount of money, but if it helps you keep other players, then I still think it's a net positive.
And I know this is probably a very simplistic way of looking at it, but more and more schools have the $30,000 to give.
Yeah.
So, more schools are starting to catch up, whether they want to or not, with, hey, we gotta start shelling out the money. And I just wanted to ask you this because I know you mentioned this before. And so, do you think with Sharon Moore now at the helm at Michigan and kind of a new regime taking over there on the coaching staff, do you think they'll be more receptive to NIL opportunities, or is that more an administrative thing?
It's hard to say because I know that Sharon Moore is going to be more aggressive recruiting. I think he's going to be more aggressive offering highly ranked recruits. I think he's going to because that's the thing. Jim Harbaugh, I love him for everything that he did, but he did get a little bit lackadaisical on the recruiting trail. He kind of would his role was kind of like the closer. He would come in at the end. It's not, he did go out and see people. I'm not saying that he didn't do that, but I think that Sharon Moore is going to bring more energy like Matt. Jim Harbaugh wasn't out there doing Matt Rule. I'll just say it like that. And he probably didn't need to, but I think part of it is the Michigan administration. And so I'm just not sure if they're going to go the same route that like Nebraska, so I don't know if they'll ever get like a Dylan Raiola type because look, if you look at this class, Nebraska signed 3 in the top 100. Michigan did not. It depends. I think if you're looking at the composite rankings, I think their quarterback fell outside of it. I think they got 1 or 2, but Nebraska signed more top 100 players than Michigan did. So, that just kind of goes to show you where their NIL is. I do think they're trying to get more aggressive with it, but I don't see them being like Ohio State. So
Tony White heading to UCLA, I don't think it's going to happen this year, but I do think he will probably not be a part of the Nebraska coaching staff within the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, Jeremy, I think he's definitely been mentioned as a candidate, and I do think it makes sense. He's got ties to UCLA, but there's PJ Fleck's been connected there. I'm not sure if that's gonna, go down, but I just have a hard time seeing UCLA, hiring Tony. I feel like Tony White is like the only way Tony White goes to UCLA is if a lot of their other options say no. that would, I just don't. I feel like they need. Yes, I feel exactly what Mitch is saying. Some type of a splash hire. I mean, just somebody that's proven. I don't know about a splash hire, but just somebody that's
They
like a
need it
proven
desperately.
coach. Yeah, I mean, they're happy to have. You talk to UCLA fans, they're happy to have Chip gone. Like they're not heartbroken. And then the UCLA administration is probably also happy because instead of if they had fired Chip like a month ago, they would have had to pay him, I think, like almost $9 million. And instead, I think Ohio State ended up paying them $1.5 million to pay his buyout. So UCLA saved about $10 million. So I don't think that they're too heartbroken over it.
I don't think so either. And it's interesting too, because Martin Jarman, the athletic director, used to be the athletic director at BC, and he bolted out of BC as quick as he could once the UCLA job was open. So that's interesting. Let's see.
It's also interesting too, like with Jonathan Smith when he went to Michigan State, because he had, if he hadn't been at Michigan State, I feel like he probably would have went to Washington or UCLA. So it's interesting how the timing all works out. It's like with Matt Rule, if the Minnesota Vikings. If the Minnesota Vikings had offered Jim Harbaugh the job 2 years ago, I think Matt Rule would be the coach of the Michigan Wolverines right now.
That would be bad for us.
So it's just crazy how, I mean, and maybe it would have been Sharon Moore, but I know there was definitely like he was like their top target, and I think he saw what was coming at Carolina, and I think he was ready to leave. So it would not, if it turned out differently, I could very well easily see Matt Rule being the coach of the Wolverines right now. So I'm glad that it worked out for Nebraska. Imagine what that Loon Fleck could do with UCLA talent. Let him stay up north, winning 8 games a year.
I love PJ Fleck, and I know that's not the thing to say as a Nebraska fan, but I just love how like aggressive he is when he coaches, and how he just doesn't care, and he'll find something that works, he'll stick to it, and he's very confident in how he leads his team, and you can tell his Minnesota teams have really bought into it.
I like that they have an identity and they know who they are. They know they're not Ohio State or USC, and their teams always get better. Although this year they did somewhat struggle a little bit, 5-7. That kind of surprised me, but
they still made a bowl game technically. So
they did, and they did play well in their bowl. They play very well in bowl games, and that's another credit to coaching, I think. So it's going to be, I mean, 2 years down the road, I feel like UCLA led by PJ Fleck is better than Chip Kelly. So if UCLA goes from Chip Kelly to PJ Fleck, I think that's a huge win for them, to be honest.
Just like from Jeff Hafley to Bill O'Brien, I think that's a big upgrade too. He's a very good.
Joe Barry to Jeff Hafley, the former DC, so I'm still happy about it.
Oh, I am. I do
like Bill O'Brien. I think he's going to do a good job, though.
Yeah, especially with his New England ties, and I think it's very hard to win at Boston College because it's more of a prestigious academic school, and they want to keep it that way. But still, they're not very good at NIL or forking out money. So we'll see how it goes for Bill. I certainly wouldn't want the job. He's a very good coach, meaning Fleck. He gets the most out of his teams, and they outplay their recruiting rankings. He's our Mike Leach. That's a very good comparison. I would agree with that for sure. I think
definitely a different way of doing it than Mike Leach, but he definitely does it. I mean, he gets those big offensive linemen. He always finds really good defensive backs too. Yep. Always.
Antoine Winfield recently. Then there was just one this past year whose name I forget.
Well, they took the kid Benjamin St. Just. Was like Michigan essentially said like he should medically retire, and then he transferred to Minnesota and became like a top. I think it was like a 2nd or 3rd round pick. So.
Wonder what Minnesota saw that Michigan just kind of raised the red flag on.
Yeah, I can't remember what it was, but there was some that some of that went on with Eric All too, and I know that's why he ended up transferring. And so sometimes that's how it works out. I mean, teams and doctors and stuff, and they just don't have the same opinions. But you never really know how it all transpires. But at any rate, I do think it's going to be interesting to see how that UCLA hire plays out. But I don't see Tony White taking that job. I don't see him getting off of that job.
No, I don't see him taking a job. Yeah, I think he's good for now, but I do think he'll move on in the future. And I'd rather him, like I said before earlier, I'd rather him do that than have to buy out his contract. And I'm just excited to see what he can do with the defense this year.
Yeah, this defense is going to be fun to watch, I think. And JD, I wrote about this yesterday, and JD Pickle talked about it. But this team is, returning 70% of its production. So I mean, when you add that, you add 70% of your production coming back, and you've got a 5-star quarterback. And I just feel like there's a lot of reasons to be, really excited about. There are some injury concerns, and I'm somewhat concerned, I guess, about Turner Corcoran now. Because he's not going to practice at all in the spring. And I think Matt Rule said he might not even be ready for the fall. So I guess we'll see how that, the offensive line is going to have to develop. But I do feel like that if I feel like Grant Bricks could come in and start right away.
I feel that way about, a bunch of guys just in this class alone. Somebody like Carter Nelson or, obviously Dylan. I mean, Dante Dowdell, I know he's not a recruited high school kid, but a transfer. He could easily start right away. And, that kind of just made me think there were some players listed as being unable to participate in spring practice. And one of them was Gabe Irvin. So,
yeah,
I mean, that running back room.
I think maybe Ramir too. I'm
gonna look up the names real quick while you talk, but safe to say our running back room is already kind of in rough shape, and we haven't even started the season yet.
And Matt Rule was talking about Micah Makuza. I don't know if you saw that, but basically said he's got some work to do to get up to the standard of Nebraska, which in some ways I think I like that the standard in Nebraska is much higher than it was at Florida, apparently. So I think he'll get there. I know he said some stuff like that last year about guys too. So
yeah, but I wonder what that work is.
I think that Matt Rule's winter conditioning is just harder than other teams, and I think he's just not ready for it.
And quite honestly, the winter conditioning paid off last year in terms of, being, fresh late in games and things like that. And it was noticeable, it was noticeable. And
I mean, people talk about Rule as like, a player's coach. And I do think, he is, but he coaches the hell out of these kids. He coaches them hard. I mean, and they work their butts off. So, like they do these match drills. And I mean, Sean Callahan, a lot of the Husker reporters have talked about it, but they go hard. And so can be a little different if you transfer in, but I love to see that, Jabal Banks is coming in and winning competitions. That's the kind of thing you want to see. And in terms of the running back room, Dowdell, Johnson, Ives, it'll be interesting to see how that, plays out, can get those guys healthy. But Dowdell to me really is the star. I think he's going to have a huge impact on this offense next year.
Yeah, and you look at the way he runs and the skill set he brings. I think it's kind of similar to what we thought that Kawan Lacey would be, like that Big Ten, physical but fast running back. And I was upset when we missed out on Lacey, but I think Dowdell is a similar fit that would be able to work well.
Yeah, and he's kind of one that just of all the additions. I mean, I know everybody talks about Dylan Raiola and Carter Nelson, but I really feel like he's gonna rush for 1,000 yards this year. I think he's gonna break our streak of we haven't had a 1,000-yard rusher since like 2018. I want to say I'm pretty sure it was Divine Azigbo the first year that Scott Frost was the head coach.
Yeah, I want to say it was that too,
but it would be great if we could. Break through that, give our freshman starting quarterback, a solid running game and some play action, passing opportunities. I feel like that's the thing that is going to be really exciting is, giving Dylan Raiola the chance to really do some play action passing with some of these weapons that we've got.
Hopefully no more calls from Kirk Herbstreit. Poor Kirk's getting thrown under the bus for that. And
I know. I don't really understand why people are so mad. Yeah, I don't understand why people are so mad about that. I mean, it's not like Dylan Raiola made his decision because of what Kirk Herbstreit told him. I mean, come on. Like, that's just stupid. I just cannot believe it.
It definitely has nothing to do with the fact that his uncle coaches at Nebraska and his father was a Nebraska legend and he's been around the program his whole life.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's like, I mean, it's just, so you think if Kirk Herbstreit, told Dylan Raiola to go to Tennessee, he would have done, it just doesn't make sense. It's like, come on, people. And
actually, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, the Georgia fans have been ridiculous. And who's ridiculous are the Oklahoma fans. I don't know if you've seen that, but they literally were like celebrating the injury of Jordy Ball.
Oh, yeah.
Like, good God, people. Yeah. Get away from the message boards. Go have your feet actually touch some grass somewhere, breathe some air, and realize that it's probably not the best life decisions to be cheering the injury of a college athlete. Like, I understand maybe you don't want to see her succeed at Nebraska. Like, I get that, but she did pitch her team to a freaking national championship. So, maybe have some grace. I don't know. That's just me, but I'm not from Oklahoma, so.
Yeah, Georgia and Oklahoma fans are for some reason suffering this week, and I don't know why they're acting like jerks, but here they are. Let's see. He said, "We all know." I mean, yeah, but at the same time, the fallout is just fans bitching and being upset. It's not like the NCAA is knocking on our door.
Yeah, Kirk is in Ohio State. I mean, he graduated there. I think that he does pretty good analysis for the most part. He kind of drives me crazy, but I think that I don't think he shows he doesn't come off as an Ohio State homer to me. I'll say that. I think he does a pretty good job of calling it like he sees it, and that's the nicest thing I can say about Kirk Herbstreit.
I remember back in 2019 when he was praising the program, and they were building the new facilities at the time, and he was saying that something special could happen here, and so he's been kind of supporting Nebraska for a little bit. I remember he was very high on Scott Frost at the time, and so this isn't necessarily out of the blue. I think he has an admiration, or at least respects Nebraska to some degree.
And I think, yeah, he does, respect Matt Rule. And I do think Matt Rule is, building things the right way. So we'll see. Kirk is a big Big Ten fan. He wants the Big Ten to dominate, and having Nebraska back as the ranked team would be good. Would be huge for the Big Ten. It would be good for all of college football, frankly. Just like I think having Florida State and Michigan and all those, Miami, I think that is good for college football, even if some of us don't like it. Yeah, Oklahoma, it's good to have those rivalries. It's good to, but Nebraska being good again, I think would be a positive. And I know a lot of people in the state of Nebraska that would be a lot less depressed if they started winning. So that would be another positive thing.
And some, not mentioning any names outside the state of Nebraska, who would be less depressed if they started winning. And maybe certain writers would enjoy writing a little bit more if Nebraska started winning. And but it'll come, I think.
Speaking of winning, I do want to talk about Nebraska basketball.
There we go.
Before we got about 10 minutes left or so here. It's huge weekend. Michigan's coming to town, and then today, and then tomorrow we got Caitlin Clark coming to town to the Vault. So going to be a couple of exciting games. The loss to Northwestern was very disappointing. That was, I felt like they were going to lose that game, but I didn't think they were going to lose it the way that they did. Which was, they lost the turnover battle, the 3-point battle, the offensive. They just fell flat on their face. So
They did.
I am worried about Michigan a little bit. They won't have Doug McDaniel, their point guard. They just beat Wisconsin. So they have, the thing is I think they've led like 10. I think they've played 13 Big Ten games now. They're 3-10, but they've led at the half of 10 of those 13 games now. And that was the same case on against Wisconsin. They were able to finish it. So you can't overlook this Michigan team. And if you're Nebraska, you've got Michigan and Rutgers, who are basically like the bottom of the barrel in the Big Ten right now. And so you've got to win these next two games. Like, you just have to.
Yeah, and you got to be able to rebound the basketball. Turnovers were, again, a problem on Wednesday. Turnovers have been a problem the entire season. And, you got to – I was going to say you got to rotate defensively better. I thought they did okay, but, again, it just wasn't enough. And I get the double team defense and the pressure that it creates, but sometimes it does more harm than good.
Yeah, I did not understand the lineup change of not starting Jamarcus Lawrence. I know he hasn't been great this year, but
he's been more of an anchor than an asset this year, honestly. So I kind of understood. I like Gary off the bench, but Lawrence has just been wildly inconsistent this year.
Well, I thought the mistake was starting Josiah Leak. Because then you got because you got Casey. They had Casey, Bryce Williams, Alik, Juwan Gary, and Rink, and there's no ball handlers there whatsoever.
Gotcha.
And so, I mean, I know Lawrence hasn't been great, but I think he's been better. And I mean, you look at the Illinois game and they had like fewer than 10 turnovers. His defense, I think, is also, better, at least on the perimeter, better than Casey. I mean, Casey is just not a good defender. I mean, that's just, there's no way Bo Buie made him look ridiculous the other night. And he can't cover anybody.
He really did, yeah.
I mean, like, he's so slow. That's the thing. Is like, yeah, I know Jamarcus offensively can struggle, but he is still the team's best point guard, and he's the best, perimeter on ball defender. I mean, Sam Hoiberg's pretty good too, but Casey cannot check people, and CJ can a little bit on the wing. But like, if you're talking about backcourt, I mean, like, we're lucky that Doug McDaniel's not playing, because Nebraska has one guy who could check Doug McDaniel, and that's Lawrence. Nobody else. So I mean, that I think is fortunate. The thing I am worried about with Michigan, though, is they do shoot the three ball well, and Nebraska gives up way too many open threes.
Yep.
So that's where, if you let a team make like 12 3-pointers, like, they're going to have a shot. They're going to have a shot to beat you. So they got to figure that out, and we'll see how that plays out today.
I feel like with Lawrence is that, like, I know he's a point guard, but I don't feel like his strong suit is necessarily kind of running an offense. I feel like he's better in terms of, bringing the shooting and the driving ability in the lane that a point guard does, but I don't know if he's capable of being the conductor of an offense.
Yeah, and I think he's better. He's more of a combo guard. I mean, it's unfortunately, this is where the Aaron Eulis thing hurts us, because he was supposed to be the point guard of this team. I mean, that's what Fred recruited, the transfer portal, because I mean, he ran Iowa's team last year, and his shooting ability wasn't the best, but I really believe that, with Fred Hoiberg, one of the best shooters of all time, I think that he really would have he would have been a productive player for us. So, then that really leaves us with basically Lawrence and, Hoiberg, and then trying to, do it with Bryce Williams, and, trying to have Rink Mass do it, Casey. So that's been part of the reason you've had so many turnovers. And I just thought it was a weird matchup against Northwestern. I understood it, trying to pound the ball inside against Northwestern. That's what we did the first time. But defensively, I just thought, you're going to give up a lot of it's too much spacing and it's like, there are just too many, we already have a hard time covering shooters when we're playing, three guys. I mean, you're playing that lineup, you're playing four basically big guys. And I just think that made it hard to, cover all the 3-point lines. But, it is what it is. And Northwestern's a really good team. I mean, that's the thing is, it is a roller coaster, Jeremy, you're right. But the Big Ten is very difficult, and it's hard to win games on the road. That's why, to me, the Illinois game was such a shot to the nuts, because you played so well. It's like you weren't going to play that well 2 games in a row on the road. Like, that's just the way that I felt about it.
Yeah.
And so, like to split those 2 games would have been, I mean, that was a tough ask. And so they played well enough to do it, but didn't get the win because some bad calls, I think, against Illinois. But now you got to turn around against Michigan, and they've been exceptional at home this year. And I think the key today is just get off to a fast start, because, I don't think that this Michigan team, has the horses to really hang with Nebraska without their starting point guard. And if they can just get a lead early and kind of get some momentum and just get that performance on Wednesday, out of their mind.
Yeah. And, I think that Nebraska is, again, just going to have to limit the turnovers, and they're going to have to focus on taking high percentage shots, not quick shots. And I think one of the things that I noticed more on Sunday than I did on Wednesday, but Tominaga did a much better job of moving without the basketball. And quite honestly, I think when he moves without the basketball is when he's at his best, because that also forces the defense to follow him and trail him, and kind of distracts them in that way. So I think, Tominaga's involvement in the offense without shooting the ball necessarily is going to be important as well.
And so just to give you an idea of where things are with the bracketology. Yeah, thank you for the compliment, Jake. So Nebraska, they did drop a little bit after the loss to Northwestern, but the bracketology from ESPN still has them. Basically, they're among the last 4 teams to get a bye. So they're basically the eighth last team in the tournament right now. So they've got a little bit of wiggle room, but if you lose one of these 2 games, you're probably going to be, one of the last 4 teams in. So you gotta to make it to your point, Jeremy, in the roller coaster. You got to kind of get the roller coaster going back up now. That's because they've lost 3 or 4, which will be okay if they win the next 2 games. But if you lose one of these next 2, then all of a sudden you've lost 3 of 6, and you lost to one of the worst teams in the league on your home floor, and that will not look good on the resume. So,
and the people who want to fire Fred, who else are you going to get for this job that probably is doing as good a job as he can?
Yeah, I think Fred's doing fine. I mean, I want this, I guess the way that I look at it is at least it's trending, the program is trending in the right direction. We went from 10 wins or whatever to 16 last year, and we've already got 16 wins this year. Definitely going to get over that mark, probably going to get to 20. And I mean, regardless of whether or not, they make the NCAA tournament, I don't think you fire a coach that gets to 20 wins at Nebraska, because that, to me, that's like the benchmark. And if most of the time, if you win 20 games, you're going to make it to the NCAA tournament. I mean, that's what Danny Nee used to talk about, 30, 40 years ago, it seems like. So if Nebraska can just get back to that point, and I think Fred is the best, vehicle to do that, I think that the program will be in a healthy spot going forward. It makes zero sense to make progress and then fire the guy who's making the progress.
And people have to also realize that the ceiling for Nebraska basketball isn't really terribly high to begin with. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't think we're going to be NCAA champions in basketball anytime soon. So I just think it's important to keep that in mind. And it's okay for a program to have a ceiling and, have, somewhat realistic expectations.
I mean, since I could be wrong on this, but I want to say the Tyronn Lue team made it in 1998, I want to say. And beyond that, we made it one time. So in the last 25 years, Nebraska has made the NCAA tournament once. So, I mean, it's not like Fred, took over a program that was making it every year, right? I mean, and yeah, it took kind of a downward trend that I think, maybe the program was even worse off than some of us thought that it was when Tim Miles left, but he's got it back to a really strong point right now. And I think if we keep building on it, I mean, look at some of the recruits that we've got coming in. That kid from Wisconsin is absolutely going off. And I feel like, Fred's starting to get, high school recruiting down. And so I feel like this would be the worst time to make a move, regardless of what happens the rest of the season.
Yeah, you talk about the kid from Wisconsin. I'm looking up his name right now, actually, just so I can make sure I have it right. Nick Janowski.
Yeah, he just had like a 40-point game recently.
Yeah, he had a 45-point game. I believe it was 5 or 6 days ago. So I think he's going to be a really strong player. We stole him from the state of Wisconsin too, which is not easy to do when you look at the Badgers, who, by the way, are also struggling. But, I do think, his recruiting has been really, really solid. And that's one area that Miles just didn't do a good job with, honestly. He might have been a good X's and O's coach, but you also got to know how to recruit. And I don't think Miles did a very good job in terms of recruiting at the end, at the very least.
And the thing I like about Fred too is he's got the NBA background. He's been successful, with Iowa State. He's won a lot in college, and I feel like he's the biggest reason why Nebraska gets pretty good players in the transfer portal, because he's showing with like Juwan Gary and Tominaga, Wilcher. I mean, he's showing that guys are like improving and developing in their rink mass. Their professional futures are brighter. After coming to Nebraska, even looking at guys like Derek Walker and Sam Griesel. They're not getting to the NBA, but they're still playing professional basketball. And Fred Hoiberg, is definitely helping them in that process. And so I feel like the more Nebraska keeps winning, with the way that they, do NIL, I feel like they're in a good spot recruiting, not only for high school recruiting, but also that transfer portal. I feel like they're going to get a lot of good players there. And so, yeah, I think keep it going. Obviously, they have to win today. They have to win today, or their NCAA tournament hopes are going to take a big hit. This is the term must win is overused, but today is a must win game. No question.
Absolutely. And, I think this sets the back half of the schedule sets up nicely for a team that needs to win as many games as possible from here on out. So I think that's something to keep in mind as well.
Yep, I definitely agree with that. We didn't really get to the other game, but see if the women's basketball team can knock off Caitlin Clark and the Hawkeyes on Sunday. They
What, she need 39 points to
to break the scoring record. So hopefully that doesn't happen tomorrow, but we'll see.
I mean, Caitlin Clark, I know, it's not. She's just a fun player to watch. I mean, just from a basketball standpoint, she is a lot of fun. And say what you want about her, say what you want about Angel Reese, but those two have really kind of made women's basketball, a talking point again in the modern sports world. I can remember like Lisa Leslie and Cheryl Swoops and all those really, really talented basketball players. And now we're looking at the next generation. And I think Clark and Reese, whether you love them or hate them, they get you talking and they provide excitement on and off the court.
And on that note, for Nebraska fans, don't forget the name Britt Prince, man. She's going to be an absolute star next year. So she might not be Caitlin Clark, but she probably be the closest thing Nebraska will have. So in terms of women's basketball,
to watch too, yeah.
Women's sports are trending up. You got softball at Nebraska. Hopefully Jordy Ball is healthy and able to, continue the rest of the season. Sounds like she may have had a knee injury, so I'm not sure what the severity is there. I know we're all have her in our thoughts and prayers. But the volleyball team keeps adding talent. They look loaded. Women's basketball projected in the field right now. So they're definitely going to probably be an NCAA tournament team. And with Britt Prince coming next year, the future is very bright. And not just for a lot of Nebraska sports, the future is very bright. So thanks a lot, Trev Alberts. I think you're doing a great job there too. So.
And having Trev Alberts with the contract extension for the early 2030s, I think having a stable leader to lead the charge throughout all of this is going to be important. And I think Alberts is the guy to do it. And good on Nebraska for locking him up long term. Yeah,
because you talk about the Bill Moose hire. I mean, but seriously, having bad ADs and presidents and it's like having a bad owner in the NFL. It's like having Daniel Snyder as your owner in the NFL. You ain't winning nothing.
John Henry of the Red Sox bought another PGA entity. He can't even spend on his baseball team. So anyway, it is really important to have a stable athletic director. And not only is it important to have a stable athletic director, but these are challenging times in terms of the college sports landscape. And I really feel like Alberts knows, where Nebraska's place is in this and how to navigate it. And that's extremely important as well, because quite frankly, I don't think Bill Moose would know how to kind of handle this modern, not that he could handle a lot, but I'm trying to be nice here, but I just don't know if Bill Moose, let's just say, would be able to handle the modern collegiate athletic landscape. And I think Trev has a, let's just say, better idea of how to do it.
Yeah, we're in good hands, I think. So at any rate, guys, thanks for joining us for another chat. We will be back on Monday for another episode of our podcast. And make sure you check out HuskerBigRed.com between now and then. And as always, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.